George the Steamroller had an infamous reputation of making things difficult for the engines, and after an incident involving Thomas and a tarmac crossing, they were right to be wary. But as long as George still had work to do on the roads, the other engines had to be content. Edward was bringing a few workmen and mining tools to the quarry. On his way, he passed by Thomas, who was on a flatbed. "Oh dear," exclaimed Edward. "What happened to you, Thomas?" "It's that blasted steamroller," fumed Thomas. "He paved over the rails, causing me to crash into a barn. You be careful round here, Edward, especially on crossings. George will keep causing trouble just to get our attention." "I will. Still, his actions won't go unheard of for long." Meanwhile, George had enjoyed his little trick.
"Railways are no good. Turn them in the roads. That'll teach that useless blue puffball to ignore me."
George and his crew were trailing behind a lorry full of tarmac. They stopped at a level crossing waiting for a train to pass. George grew impatient. He glared at the rails as a naughty idea flew into his funnel. As the gates opened, the lorry proceeded onward. "Come on," called George's driver. "No time to dawdle. Let's move." So George moved. Too quickly. He jumped forward and bumped the back of the lorry, causing some tarmac to spill on the rails.
"Oops,"
said George, pretending he was sorry. On a tight schedule, the crew had no choice but to carry on and clean the mess later, unaware that George had already swept over the spilled tarmac. Later, Edward was approaching the crossing. As he looked on, he saw a man waving a red flag. Danger lay ahead. "Driver! Brakes!" His driver wasted no time as Edward's train came to a screeching halt. Just in time. Edward was shocked. At the crossing where the rails once were was a patch of rough tarmac paved over it. They were a few inches away from a nasty accident. "George," growled Edward, "I reckon this is his doing." "It's a good thing you stopped in time," said a voice to Edward. Some townsfolk had arrived to see what the commotion was about. "I saw the whole thing," said a man. "That clumsy steamroller paved over the rails here with tarmac and quickly rolled away before we could call them back. We had phoned for those workmen to return here and fix it," said the signalman, "but they won't be here for the next couple of hours." "I can't wait that long," said Edward sadly. "My train has to arrive at the quarry on time." One of the workmen from Edward's train examined the road. "We could take out our pickaxes and chip away at this rubbish, but it'll take us a while to clear this out." "Maybe we can help," the townsfolk suggested. "If we work together, we can have this lot cleared out in no time." "You would do that?" asked Edward kindly. "Will that be all right with you?" "Of course," answered the crowd cheerfully. "Anything for our Edward. Confusion and delay doesn't suit you anyway." Pickaxes, hammers, and even garden hoes were passed around from one to another. The townsfolk and crewmen were chipping away at the road bit by bit until glimpses of rail were uncovered. Soon, the tarmac was removed completely and the rails were visible again. "Peep, peep!" Edward whistled happily. "Thank you all for your hard work." Tired but cheery, the townsfolk waved goodbye as the blue engine set off. Shortly, a lorry arrived at the scene. "We're sorry for the inconvenience," said an inspector. "We've come to clean up the mess now." The gentleman laughed. "The mess? Never mind, chap. We've gone ahead and cleared it up for you." The inspector was embarrassed. He turned his heel and muttered something about George in a less than polite tongue. The next day, Edward was resting at his station. Just then Gordon puffed in with the express, looking worried. The fat controller was there waiting for him. From the quick exchange of words, Edward heard a story involving a certain steamroller and a poor truck forcefully moved by a speeding Gordon. "Whoever caused this disturbance will have me to answer to," boomed the fat controller. Edward smirked. I knew it wouldn't be long. He then thought of whatever punishment awaited old George. Whatever it was, it wouldn't be pleasant, but possibly permanent.